The 9,000th circle of hell is known as the strongest. It is the place where the strongest demons gather, battling each other endlessly for eternity. The sky glows blood red and flames scorch the burnt soil. The battles raging on are not for the title of the strongest. No, that title has been taken for 10 millennia. Hell, which had been divided forever under the rule of the 7 great demons, was united by one man. The reason that all demons are united, the true Lord, the great King. A dark-haired young man sat on a magnificent throne built from the bleached bones of the 7 great demons. Though he sat on the throne with his eyes closed, the aura he emanated could blow anyone away. Kneeling in rows in front of him were thousands of demons who were shaking in fear of his massive power. One of these demons slowly began to inch towards the great king. With the body of a hulking beast covered head to toe in crimson fur, it stood 5 meters tall on 4 legs. His body was solid, almost as if carved from stone, with a single horn atop his head. Numerous sharp teeth protruded from the bottom of his mouth, and massive bat wings loomed on either side. This was a typical appearance of the demonic forces. A representative of the demonic forces bent down on one knee before the king. It was once said that no one could rule the 9,000th circle of hell. However, all the demons present here understood the fear of the great, the Lord. 10,000 years ago, a man with the power of the devourer descended into hell. This man had immediately begun exterminating demons one by one. He'd started with the first 1,000th circle of hell and eventually reached the 9,000th circle, devouring demons along the way. He became stronger and stronger, becoming, in the end, the most powerful lord. Thousands, no, tens of thousands of demons had been absorbed by his power of the devourer, and even the 7 great demons who'd never overcome one another in strength, fell to their knees before him. The reason for the unification of all demons, a terrible monster devouring them one after another. Even Palak, who didn't know fear, couldn't help shaking in terror. Why would you go back? Don't you already have everything there is in hell? Palak mumbled with fear, barely opening his mouth. Tell me, what have we got? There was accusation in his voice that was slowly turning into anger. There's no food, no entertainment. What in this damn place is there that I can possibly have? The wasteland, the bloody sky, and the unquenchable tongues of flame. There's nothing in the 9,000th circle of hell but that. When he heard that, Palak rounded his eyes. So you're hungry. I've prepared something special for you. Hey, guys, bring it in. Yes, sir. The demons, following orders, brought in a giant plate. On it, covered in dark, almost black blood, laid the head of a demon. He is the last demon of their kind. Your Majesty, though it is a modest gift, it expresses our loyalty. Please do not refuse, said Palak. The spectacle presented to Kang Yu looked disgusting, causing his face to become even more distorted in anger, and he blurted out, "Unintelligent bunch, that's not what I want." He threw the plate on the ground, and it flew away with a crackle. With his hands clenched firmly in fists, the young man stepped forward. I don't want to eat this disgusting-looking and tasteless food." His hands trembled. The indignation swallowed him up so much that his voice began to break down. "Kimchi jjigae. I want a kimchi jjigae. It's my true desire. Food filled with blood and meat." Kang Yu clenched his fists even harder and screamed. It was a red dish with meat, but not at all what demons imagined. Palak looked at Kang Yu with eyes full of devotion. Whose head is it to be made of? Or probably from the entrails. Just say the word, and I'll cook it all, no matter how difficult it is. Kimchi jjigae is something else, Kang Yu said in a complaining voice. For demons, eating was nothing more than devouring the defeated loser. And, you said you didn't have enough entertainment. Indeed, you have already killed all the strongest, as was expected of the Lord. Lord of bloodshed and massacre. I want to read a manhwa or a novel. Palak, dissatisfied, punched the ground with all his power. Under this pressure, a hole was formed in the ground. I am so weak that I can't please you. Please, kill me. Listen to me, please. Kang Yu has returned to his throne in despair. At least I need a woman. Yes, at least a woman, a woman. We have Lilith. Lilith, the succubus queen, the first beauty of hell. One of the demons lined up stepped forward and inquired, will Lilith's heart not be enough? Her voice was strange enough, and her many tentacles were already wrapped around the hands of the young lord. Her face with 18 eyes blocked everything. The king was silent. 18 eyes. There were dozens of tentacles moving by themselves. A tongue that looked like a snake. She was called an incredible beauty. But Kang Yu's head hurt and he put his hand to his forehead. Succubus? Why a succubus? It didn't look as he had imagined. After all, a succubus that eats other people's sexual energy should at least be beautiful. Yet she looked even worse than Palak himself. And she wasn't the only one. This was what all hell's succubi looked like. Tonight I will come to His Majesty's bedroom. No, don't come. Oh, you must be embarrassed. You can't do this because you're the king of the 9,000th circle of hell. just don't come. Oh, how sweet. You shouldn't be so modest. I'll be with you my whole life. I beg you, disappear. Kang Yu tilted his head down and covered his face with his hands. He was not the kind of person who only looks at someone's appearance in love. On the contrary, he truly believed that if he fell in love, appearance would not play a big role. However, not to this extent. The problem wasn't that she was scary. Her appearance just didn't fit human aesthetic standards in any way. At all. To Earth, Kang Yu thought strongly about going back to Earth. Despite the servants' desperate attempts to persuade him to stay, his decision was firm. Contrary to their intentions, their pleading only strengthened his desire to return. And going back, a few days before, he had finished the last mighty demon, which completed his preparations. Finally, it's time to be compensated for 10,000 years of torment. It's His Majesty's choice. He had sworn allegiance and could do nothing but follow the king's wishes. Halleck, do I have to do it again? I'm sorry. Halleck nodded politely and went to the servants to gather the necessary items. The weapons of the 7 great demons they fought were what had to be prepared. It is said that the power contained in these weapons is so great, it could form a gap in space and time. Recently, by consuming the last of the strongest, Kang Yu had received the last weapon. And now, all of them were lying before him, ready for use. The preparation is complete. Excellent. Kang Yu stood up from the throne and walked slowly towards the 7 trophies, each adorned in different shapes and colors. There were 7 of them, and they comprised the power of the whole 9,000 circles of hell. The weapons complemented each other perfectly in both power and appearance. If the king put all the energy that he had absorbed into these weapons, he really would be capable of opening a time portal. Kang Yu quietly took in a deep breath. He had waited so long for this moment, the chance to finally return to Earth. An unbelievable amount of energy from Kang Yu's body began to flow into his weapon. The power of a devourer that had grown over tens, hundreds, thousands of years. It was no exaggeration to say that even the 9,000th circle itself had already been absorbed by the king. His power was just that great. Manhwa. This was the word used to describe the part inside Kang Yu that contained a mass of great power. And now, the flow of Manhwa perfectly complemented the weapons of the 7 great demons. In an instant, there was a split in space, and a black passageway appeared before his eyes. I can finally return to Earth. The vivid remnants of his memories on Earth came to mind at that very moment. Even after 10,000 years, he had not forgotten his hometown. In that place, there was no family nor woman waiting for him. Even so, even if my town is small, it's better than being here in a place with no food or entertainment. He was willing to do anything to get out of this place that was full of bloodshed and murder. So, it's necessary to set the right time. Kang Yu didn't want to move now. After all, the face of the earth could have changed enormously in 10,000 years. So much so, that his beloved Kimchi Jjiggy may no longer be there either. An earth without Kimchi Jjiggy was unimaginable. Just thinking of it caused goosebumps to rise all over his body. Kang Yu decided to travel back to the time before he first went to hell. Well, I will go now. King. Halleck bowed his head in despair, for he knew the Lord's will was firm. From all of Lilith's 18 eyes, tears resembling chicken droppings were pouring out. She began to speak. Are you really going to leave me? Don't weep. It looks awful, so terrible that maybe one day, her crying image will appear in a horror film. She seemed to have misunderstood the Lord's words, for her tentacles trembled slightly, and she bawled, Oh, what kind words? It seems my heart is torn apart by your love. And when she finished speaking, one of the tentacles closest to her heart burst, and pus began to gush out of it. Oh my God, oh my king, oh my love, don't come near me. Lilith wants to go with the king, too. Get lost. Looking at Lilith approaching while oozing with pus, Kang Yu hurried to the open portal without a trace of hesitation. Kang Yu, no matter what happens, Lilith will follow you. Her screams gradually faded as his consciousness was enveloped by an unusual feeling. May our paths never cross. He showed Lilith his middle finger. No, not only to her, but to all the agony he had endured in the past 10,000 years. Time controls life, so it was difficult to manipulate. Kang Yu set the time as close as possible to before he first went to hell. An error of 10, 20 years would not matter. After all, he was born an orphan, so he had nothing to change in the past and has no expectations for a better future. The only thing that mattered was getting back to the earth he remembered. With the time settings now established, an unknown force began to pull him deep into the dark tunnel. Unable to resist, he calmly closed his eyes and relied on the force that was dragging him. Error of access to the nucleus. Security system activated. Error. Your power is too great. All forces are focused on defending the kernel. The system is now in reboot mode. Error. A mistake. Your power is too great. There is no way to fix the defect. Sealing has now commenced. The completely unnatural voice could be heard from all over the place. However, he was unable to ponder more about it. His consciousness, like everything else around him, became obscured. His body was in such great pain that he could hardly move his fingers. Kang Yu moaned in pain as he gathered his strength and opened his eyes. Where am I? The first thing he saw was a thick forest. The sun's rays penetrated through the dense foliage of the trees, tickling the cheeks of the young man. Kang Yu took a deep breath and forced himself to get up. A sharp pain shot across his body and spread to his head. Okay, first I should do a self-diagnosis. He had to make sure that nothing irreparable had happened to his body. Status information downloading. What? As soon as he had thought about checking his physical state, a blue panel appeared before his eyes. His eyes widened in amazement, small wrinkles appearing on his forehead, after which he turned his attention to the status window. Player name, Kang Yu. Level 1. Level 1 feature, the power of the Devourer. Special skills are currently sealed. Skills, none. Strength, 8. Vitality, 9. Physical ability, 7. Mariok, 0. Magi, 12. Intellect, 8. Wisdom, 7. What the hell is this? His condition board looked exactly like it did when he had first arrived in hell. Kang Yu's face was distorted in confusion. He couldn't understand why his status was like that. Are you saying that the powers of all those monsters, which I ate, are sealed? The power of a devourer, a unique power that had allowed him to survive in hell, the power with which he was able to become the strongest overlord. And now he is told that his man Ma Young, his power and all his abilities are sealed. He was panicked, horrified that the power he had accumulated for 10,000 years was no longer within his control. Ugh. Kang Yu took a deep breath and tried to calm down. Panic and rejection of reality would only make the situation worse. He understood that very well. Concentrate, he murmured to himself. First, you need to know about your condition. Kang Yu tried to summon Man Ma Young, the force he had accumulated over tens, hundreds, thousands of years, from devouring demons. I can't feel it. Or rather, thanks to his skillful concentration, he was able to feel Man Ma Young. But it was so miserably weak that the young man deemed it to be insignificant. Kang Yu focused on his left hand and called for the blade power, and after a moment, a sharp, black blade was drawn out from the back of his hand. The young man felt the energy from his body flow into the sword. It will be hard to get used to this. His powers, which had previously been approaching infinity, giving infinite possibilities, were now like a puddle of water at the bottom of a dried-up ocean. The realization of this fact was depressing. But the status window reflected his reality. For whatever reason his powers were sealed remained a mystery, but it was clear that his man Ma Young was almost at 0. What injustice! He recalled the moment when the status window suddenly appeared with the details of his characteristics. Did I enter the game? Kang Yu suddenly wondered if he had gotten back to Earth. Kick, kick. A nasty rattle of metal reached his ears, and he turned to where the sound was coming from. Heh heh heh. He soon realized the source of the sounds and tensed up. They were short, their height just reaching the young man's chest, with skin and sharp teeth of a light green shade. They looked exactly like filthy creatures from the first 1,000th circle of hell. As far as Kang Yu knew, there had never been such creatures on Earth. Is this not the Earth? He murmured in a tone full of despair. Kang Yu couldn't even laugh at the fact that after 10,000 years of preparation, he was still unable to get back to Earth. Kia-ah! The large crowd of ugly-looking monsters, shrieking gleefully, threw themselves at him. The monsters shouted even louder and rushed towards Kang Yu, pointing their crooked swords at him. Kang Yu used his black dagger to fight them off. Within moments, the monster's hands had fallen to the ground. After successfully defending himself by injuring his opponents, he sat on the ground to inspect his sword. Although almost all of his man Ma Young was sealed, he was still the great ruler of the 9,000 circles of hell. It was easy to handle such insignificant opponents, even with only a sword. I'll deal with these guys first. With monsters screaming wildly and attacking from all sides, he did not have time for reflection at the moment. Kang Yu was more relaxed than ever. He looked at the monsters. An anger with the aggression of a predator began to rise inside him. The monsters also felt his anger. Their legs began to fail them. There seemed to be 8 of them. If Man Ma Young was available, he wouldn't even have to move. He would have just brought them down with the help of the power. However, things were different now. How unusual it is, having to move again. He pushed his foot off the ground, instantly deflecting the monsters' attacks. Then, he sliced off their heads. The experience accumulated by thousands of years in countless wars had helped him turn the crowd of monsters into a pile of cold corpses. Ding! Level E Goblin successfully murdered. Experience points increased. Level increased by 3. I leveled up. by killing the monsters that attacked him, or more precisely goblins. The status window had appeared again. Kang Yu confirmed that the level really had increased by 3 points, so had his energy per unit. And it wasn't just an increase in numbers. Kang Yu could feel that his body had become stronger. It doesn't matter now, raising the level, raising the energy, it doesn't matter at all right now. I need to find out what this place is, whether it's Earth or not. Kang Yu extended his hand to the dead bodies of the goblins and barely opened his mouth. Devourment. The power of a devourer. The unique ability that had made him ruler of the 9,000 Circle of Hell has awakened. The dark power coming from the hands of the young man completely wrapped around the dead bodies of the goblins. As the creepy voices faded away, the dark smoke that had absorbed the energy of the bodies dispersed. Gradually, Kang Yu began to gain information about the goblins. The power of a devourer didn't allow him to read minds, but it did allow him to absorb information from the bodies he devoured. He learned about goblins' body features, their habits, lifestyle, and weaknesses. But the information he was most eager to learn was not there. There was no information about this place. Damn it. Now that the battle was over, Kang Yu allowed his frustration and disappointment to take over him. Among the energy that he had just absorbed, there was also an incredibly familiar power. That energy was barely visible, but it was impossible to deceive his instincts. Kang Yu's eyes were shining as he uttered, Magi. The bodies of goblins contain very little, but still some amount of Magi. Ding, Magi level has increased by a unit. The moment Kang Yu thought about the Magi he'd just obtained, a notification window appeared. At the same time, he felt a small amount of force entering his body. Damn it. Though he now had more strength, he swore yet again. Magi was the power that the creatures of hell have. That meant that if this place was Earth, there shouldn't have been Magi here. The likelihood that this wasn't the Earth increased. No, there was anxiety on his face. The reason he'd wanted to be the strongest in hell was so that he could someday return to Earth. Here, there were only endless massacres. In his mind, in that long period of time, all he had done was fight. After all, no one in hell was interested in anything but victory over the enemy. For me, there is no such thing. Even in the battles with the great demons, Kang Yu had remained uninterested, for he won every time. As such, he felt no satisfaction from his victories. He was interrupted from his thoughts by a sound. It was a scream from somewhere far away. The young man's eyes lit up again. This time, it wasn't the voice of a monster or a demon. He felt it intuitively. It was definitely a human scream. And besides, a lady. Kang Yu's body was trembling. For 10,000 years, he hasn't seen any girls, not even in pictures. In fact, it would be strange if he was able to retain his composure. Kang Yu confidently took a step, then another one, and ran in the direction where the scream came from. The power of acceleration. It was a power that the demon Whalefur used in his life, before it went to Kang Yu. By human standards, it was an incredible speed, but for Kang Yu, it was the speed of a snail. If he could still use Manhwa right now, he'd have arrived in the right place in only a second. It was frustrating for him to realize that he could no longer use his power at full potential. The screams became clearer and clearer. However, they were mixed with the sounds of Kang Yu's recent attackers, the goblins. As long as she doesn't look like Lilith, he wouldn't mind if she turned out to be old or overweight. The important thing was for her to have 2 eyes, 1 nose and 1 mouth, that's enough. And no tentacles. I found it. A wasteland stretched out of the thick forest laid in front of him. And there were about a dozen goblins surrounding the girl, making her scream in terror. She was sitting, clutching her bloody and obviously wounded legs firmly. Kang Yu unwittingly exclaimed. His body trembled when he saw those things surround the girl. Black hair almost reaching her waistline. An unusual cut in the eyes, puffy lips, a rising nose, and a small spot to the left of her mouth. She was so beautiful that if Kang Yu had passed by her in the streets, he surely would have lowered his head in embarrassment. But now, her beauty wasn't important at all. Now, her extraordinary beauty seemed to be a very minor problem. She's human. That was surely a human being. Kang Yu was so excited that for the first time in 10,000 years of hell, he wanted to turn to God again. The girl looked at the untidy swords of goblins running around her and was horrified. Seeing the sword pointing in her direction, the girl must have reached a state of waiting for death. At that moment, the goblins, surprised, screamed. Kang Yu broke their circle and started exterminating goblins one after the other with quick movements as if he were a predator. The eyes of the girl who fell to the ground rounded. She looked at Kang Yu with a look full of disbelief as he had brutally killed a herd of more than 10 goblins in just a few seconds. The last goblin's head fell thanks to the sharp black blade. Rotating the blade in his hands after taking the goblin's life, the young man walked towards the girl sitting on the ground. Thank you. She stood up with her wounded legs and nodded in gratitude. Kang Yu was a little shaken and took her in his arms to help her stand steadily. She held his hands, and it was as if an electric charge ran through his body. If he was in hell, he would never have felt so good. A human being. Yeah, it was a human he missed madly, a human he wanted madly to meet. The sensations he was getting now were stirring his mind. All the feelings he had endured for 10,000 years, suppressed for so long, spilled out. These feelings overwhelmed all others, completely occupying his mind. My name is Han Sol. Thank you for saving me. She looked at Kang Yu, who was holding her, but she didn't try to free herself and just bowed her head once more in gratitude. Kang Yu looked at her and made a sincere offer. Let's get married. What? It would be great if we have 3 children. What? Han Sol looked at Kang Yu in embarrassment. This offer was so sudden, she didn't know whether she should be angry or grateful to the young man. I'm sorry. Common sense returned to Kang Yu, and he shook his head, letting go of the girl's hands. Get it together. That was the person he had been so eager to meet. I can't look crazy from the start. My name is Kang Yu. Did you say your name was Han Sol? How's the wound? Does it hurt a lot? Yes, that's right. The wound isn't that bad. But suddenly the pain from the wound made her scream, and she fell. The moment she hit the ground, some rectangular object fell out of her pocket. Smartphone, he murmured, eyes shining as he watched the object fall. He was sure it was a smartphone, a thing that he still had vague memories about. I guess, it's still Earth. And her name on the phone was Korean. The ability to communicate was proof that this is the Earth, and she is obviously Korean. It's good that even there I practiced, so as not to forget Korean in hell over time. Kang Yu forbade his servants to use the devilish language and taught them the basics of Korean. Are you all right? Kang Yu tore a part of his clothing and tied it around the girl's wounded leg. It wasn't normal clothing. It was a uniform made out of fabric scarcely found in hell. Oh, yes, thank you. She pulled up her bandage and her cheeks flushed red, even though the girl was suspicious of such kindness from a stranger. She was noticeably stunned and at the same time strongly wary of both the suggestion of holding hands and the phrase about having children. Thank you for your concern. If it wasn't for Kang Yu, she'd be dead by now. And if she'd been taken prisoner, something worse could have happened. After all, it's said that monsters are attracted to people too. Thanks to him, Han Sol could move on with her life in peace. The girl felt remorse for treating the young man with fear. Be grateful, Han Sol decided, and nodded again with a smile. Although she had only recently become a player, she had heard about the game world quite often. For the benefit of the players, it was wise to organize a party, and then, to survive, betray friends in cold blood. Of course, not everyone does this, but players like Kang Yu, who were ready to rush when they heard screams, were a huge rarity. Don't strain yourself and sit down. Okay. The young man looked at Han Sol's smile and smiled a little too. Okay. Winning her trust was important. Yes, it was. Kang Yu wanted her to stay close, and not just because she's the first person he's met since returning from hell. She could give important information to him. What the hell are those monsters doing on Earth? The difference between the Earth he knew and the one he had arrived in was huge, and the girl sitting in front of him was a great way to know what happened to Earth. Han Sol continued to answer more sluggishly. For some reason, I had to hunt on my own. I'm quite new, but I decided to go through the gate to level E. It was a stupid thing to do. It was clear from her voice that she was not happy with herself. Kang Yu's eyes were shining as he listened. Gate, player, so he was not on Earth, but on one of the levels. And the fact that she's a new player. Kang Yu thought about status window he'd seen earlier. What's your level? He asked casually. I'm new, so it's only 6. You have a high level, right? What are you doing here? Kang Yu's level was actually 3 units lower, but she believed it was a high level. She would think it was weird considering he easily defeated a bunch of goblins, while she couldn't do it with level 6. Of course, she was inaccurately evaluating his level based only on his strength. I have my reasons for being here. I see. Han Sol didn't ask further after Kang Yu's ambiguous answer, and simply nodded. Even though it was rare for high-class players to appear at lower levels, she had no right to question a guy who wanted to hide his reason for being here. Can you stand up? Yes, thanks to you, I think I can walk. I'll be there for you. Oh, you don't have to. I don't want to cause any more trouble. You don't have to say no if you need help. Kang Yu put his arm around the teetering girl to support her. Han Sol tilted her head awkwardly and her face turned red. Where do you need to go? That way, the girl said, pointing her finger in the direction. Embarrassed, she didn't notice that the high-level guy didn't know where the gate was. Let's go. Kang Yu held onto the girl tightly and they went slowly. It's a good thing she doesn't ask any unnecessary questions. She certainly couldn't know anything about him, but to avoid unpleasant situations, he had to try not to cause suspicion. Otherwise, she'll think I'm crazy. He didn't want to look like a total psycho in front of the first human he met, and in front of such a beautiful person. He had to blend in with the local population. Kang Yu thought about how he accidentally met Han Sol, who was now walking along with him. Here, there was a snow-white gate before them. It was about 30 meters high. If you compared it to the black gate from which Kang Yu came, this gate was many times bigger and more powerful. This is definitely not the Earth. If she had come here through a gate, it meant that this forest filled with goblins was definitely not the Earth. Is this place something like hell? A place that comes through a gate may well be like hell. Where does this gate come from? Kang Yu looked at the gate with a rapturous look, opening his eyes wide. It was nothing like the gate formed in hell with the power of the 7 great demons. Absolutely. Kang Yu. Ah, yes, let's go. Han Sol's words pulled him out of his trance, and they stepped into the gate. Flying through one world after another, their bodies moved in the tunnel with extraordinary ease. Let's gather the flock to E-level and hunt the goblins. Got a tank. You don't need a robber. Sorry, no. When they came out of the gate, they saw a group of people shouting at each other. It was as if they were in the bazaar. Kang Yu looked at the people who had gathered at the gate entrance and felt a slight tingling in his chest again. People. What he wanted so much was for people to surround him from all sides. I really did come back. Even though the earth was different from what he remembered, the scenery was still the same. Now he was assuredly aware that he had returned. The remnants of his anxiety were gradually dissolving, and satisfaction and joy came in its place. It felt like all his burdens had been lifted. Kang Yu. Han Sol neatly called out a guy, and he turned to her. If you have time, why don't you come over and visit? I want to at least buy you lunch. She said it in a guilty voice, first looking at Kang Yu's torn clothes and then at her bandaged leg. Of course, it would have been much more appropriate to offer financial compensation, but she didn't have that opportunity. Furthermore, she did not want to part with her savior by simply saying thank you. Kang Yu was immensely surprised to hear her offer. The girl he had just rescued invited him to come and visit. In the last 10,000 years, he could only see girls in his imagination. That's why, when he received the invitation, he felt a passionate burning desire. The excitement was so strong that you could compare it with an invitation for drinks at the bar. This is. Kang Yu clenched his hands into fists. A strong desire spread throughout his body. Warmth. His imagination played out. He imagined the two of them raising 3 children in a warm, cozy house, bringing a smile to his face. How warm, he thought. The heart that had grown cold over 10,000 years was once again filled with warmth. It's not polite to refuse, so I'll gladly accept your invitation. Kang Yu's eyes shone when he nodded. He wouldn't even think of rejecting such an offer. Then follow me. Han Sol smiled a little and turned around. At that moment, one of the men at the gate came in their direction. He was dressed in warlike clothes. Player ID, please. Here you go. At the request of the man, Han Sol calmly pulled out an E-level ID. The identity is confirmed. Not even a second later, he checked her identity and nodded approvingly with a tired expression. For some reason, Kang Yu had the impression that the man was a barkeeper checking documents. Sir, your documents. What a mess. Kang Yu's face changed, and he got tense. Who knew this could happen? It was a problem. Right now, he didn't have a player ID. If I say I lost it, it'll get more complicated. And if he found his old ID, some problems might come up. Especially considering the fact that he moved into the future for 5 years. Then all his plans for a peaceful return to Earth and his future life could collapse. And most importantly, if the situation gets more complicated, he could miss out on his chance to visit Han Sol. Here it is. Kang Yu took his hand out of his pocket and covered his palm with his thumb. At the same time, the power also manifested itself. The power of illusion. Thanks to it, the consciousness of the person you're talking to would become clouded and he would see whatever was necessary. The use of this power required a tremendous amount of magi. Moreover, the higher the level of the interlocutor, more power was required. But fortunately, the person who checked the identity cards was lower than Han Sol in level. Under the influence of the power, the gaze of the man in uniform dimmed for a moment. He looked at Kang Yu's palm and nodded slowly. Your identity has been confirmed. The check lasted just a second, but all of Kang Yu's accumulated energy was used up. Kang Yu held back his heavy breathing and lowered his hand. Then, we'll go. Yes, we will. They turned their back on the inspector and headed towards Han Sol's house. Finally, it seemed like his legs were carrying themselves in the right direction. As someone once said, there's no limit to human greed. At first, he thought it would be enough to meet an ordinary girl with 2 eyes, 1 nose and 1 mouth. But as more time passed, the more he admired the beauty of Han Sol. Imagining what would happen at her house, he clenched both hands firmly. YOLO, this is my house. He followed Hansol to a shabby-looking building. Not only did her house look old, but so did everything in the area. She doesn't seem to be living well. The place they had come to looked nothing like the attractive skyscrapers in a row he had anticipated seeing. He looked at Hansol with a look filled with confidence. It's okay, I'll make some quick money and buy us a nice house. He had already mapped out their future happy life together. The door opened. Mom, I'm home. Mom, of course, Kang Yu's disillusioned mind had thought she was living alone. That's why his face was expressing his extreme disappointment right now. An exhausted middle-aged woman rushed to meet them. Is everything okay? Did you hurt yourself? It's okay. You have company with you, just like I told you to, right? Yes, of course, said Hansol, tugging at her sleeves and avoiding meeting her mother's expectant eyes. Then, she looked at Kang Yu and explained in a hurry, this is Kang Yu, and we met at the dungeon. I was in a dangerous situation because of a monster attack, but Kang Yu saved me. Oh, thank you, Kang Yu. The middle-aged woman grabbed Kang Yu's hands and bowed her head gratefully. He sensed that the woman was very worried about her daughter, who travels all the time. Shit, Kang Yu was listening now, but couldn't hear the woman's gratitude. So, she really was only calling me for lunch, Kang Yu thought, looking at Hansol. The future that Kang Yu had planned in his head was shattered. He was in the mood to climb to the top of the mountain and then throw himself down. Kang Yu, oh yeah, I was just thinking. He quickly turned his attention back to reality. No one had promised him anything, but he still felt cheated and despair clouded his mind. Our house. It's not very nice, as you can see. But don't worry, our food is great. Hansol, looking at the grim face of the guy, thought he was disappointed with their place of residence. Don't worry, that's not why I'm like this. Before going to hell, Kang Yu had been a lonely orphan, and lived in a small room that looked much worse than her house. There had been days when it was difficult to even get food. But still better than hell. In fact, living on Earth, even if you are hungry, is much better than living in hell among constant battles, in which you constantly risk your life. Would it be alright if I asked you for a favor? Yes, of course. Hansol's expression turned serious and nodded affirmatively. Kang Yu continued in a calm voice, I lost my phone. Can I use quickly yours? Of course. She took the smartphone out of her pocket and gave it to Kang Yu. The phone looked very old, and there was a thick crack on the screen. Kang Yu recognized the phone model, even though 5 years have passed. He thought to himself, convinced that the girl really wasn't in the best position. But can I scroll through the news on the internet on it? He needed to figure out what had happened to Earth in 5 years. The gate and the players. That's something that wasn't exactly on the Earth he was used to. Kang Yu found the articles from 5 years ago and began reading them carefully. Sharp changes 2202-2018. Earth changes in an unrecognizable direction. Monsters call for reinforcements. Defender's army brutally murdered. The first players appeared in America. Who are they? A sharp increase in players all over the planet. Are they the hope of humanity? Kang Yu, leisurely looking through the articles, frowned. February 22, 2018, is the day that the gate appeared all over the world. And also the day that he'd walked through the black gate to hell. So I just walked into one of the many gates. If you think about it, it was probably true. Kang Yu looked for information about his gate, but there was no detailed description of the gate on the internet. Then I'll look again. If it threatened national security, the information probably wouldn't be available online. Hansol returned from the kitchen with a deep pot. Kimchi jjigae. I would give you a plate, but alas. With a guilty expression on her face, she put the pot on the table and opened the lid. The fragrance instantly flew all over the room, causing him to drool at the dish immediately. Kang Yu stared at the kimchi jjigae. Pleasant thoughts filled his head. Kimchi jjigae. He kept staring at the pot, or rather, at its contents. The broth bubbled temptingly, the red kimchi was fragrant, and the pieces of meat on top seduced the boy. Kimchi jjigae. Kang Yu had waited so long for this moment that his heart beat faster with excitement. This was what he'd been dreaming about for 10,000 years every day. He leaned sharply toward the table like a tramp who had been hungry for weeks. It's good to be back. A warm tear rolled down his cheek. The house was a little over 20 pyong. The young man with a large appetite was gulping down the dish prepared for him so loudly so that the sound of his munching could be heard all over the house. I suppose. You are very hungry. Hansol looked at the insatiable guy and hesitantly smiled. You could say she was a bit discouraged by his display of greediness. Kang Yu wasn't paying attention to the girl's rouge face. He was only focused on the food. It's delicious, he said, as he placed a rather thick piece of meat on a spoonful of white rice and dipped it in soup. then put a kimchi leaf on top with sticks. Then he opened his mouth and swallowed it all at once with a spoon in his mouth. At the same time, he felt dizzy with joy and his vision was blurred. Damn delicious. He savored the flavors that he hadn't tasted for 10,000 years with every cell of his body. He was as excited as he was when he first met Han Sol. Oh, his excitement was replaced by pleasure. The agony of the last 10,000 years appeared in his head as a huge panorama. Damn, it's so delicious, Kang Yu cried like a small child, emptying the pot of kimchi. Actually, he didn't need food. After his body had absorbed Magi, his bodily functions had become like a demon's. Because of the Magi's movement in their bodies, demons didn't need food. Poor guys. Kang Yu, who was now enjoying himself with a delicious meal, felt pity for demons. Because there was still a human element left in the guy. Even though he didn't need food, he could taste it. To be more precise, the demons could also distinguish between the tastes, but they were distorted and did not bring them any pleasure. Is it that good? Han Sol asked, looking at the sobbing man devouring the kimchi jjigae. She was confident in her cooking skills, because ever since she was a little girl, she often did her own housework. And the kimchi jjigae she had just cooked was made with a few secrets she had learned from years of experience. However, the food she cooked wasn't so delicious that someone would cry. It was very, very tasty. Kang Yu feverishly nodded several times to confirm it. I'm glad you liked it so much. She smiled, satisfied. Although it was unusual to see a guy crying over food, especially since it was an everyday meal, it certainly didn't upset her. This was undeniable proof that her kimchi jjigae was excellent. Thank God. She'd been worried that she had nothing to offer her savior besides food. But looking at his reaction, the guilt started to dissipate. She felt his kindness and felt even more warm feelings towards the young man. What am I thinking about? It was far from a situation to think about developing relationships. She thought about the conditions she was living in and took a deep breath. Kang Yu looked at the empty pot with a sad look. It wasn't enough. Though he did not need food, his empty and motionless 10,000 years body finally came into motion. And all his feelings were so intense that he was ready to scream. Shall I cook some more? Han Sol continued looking at him with a tender gaze. At that moment, the door opened with a rumble, and a young guy entered the room. Hey, Han Sol, they say you went to the gate alone without my permission. Come here. It was a handsome blonde with short hair, dressed in an iron suit. He stormed up to the girl, cursing. The girl's eyes grew serious. Ti-hyun, who allowed you to talk to your sister like that? With her brother's arrival, she started trembling a little. He smirked and stood tall in front of Han Sol. I asked you, who let you go to the gate alone? I'm also a player now, and you're the reason I can't find a party. You're still an amateur, you don't know anything. Ti-hyun's face had an intimidating grin on it. He forcefully grabbed the girl's shoulder. I told you to cut the crap and join our guild. Everyone in my party will treat you well. Her brother hissed in her ear. His eyes were gleaming. Han Sol looked at her brother with disgust. Ti-hyun, her brother, who was 3 years older. Garbage like this man cannot be called my brother. She clenched her fists tightly and continued to stare at her brother. Ever since the gate opened 5 years ago, Ti-hyun had become a real problem. Even though their father passed away early and their mother was raising 2 children on her own, it hadn't been so bad. Their mother had a good career and made a lot of money. But in high school, Ti-hyun was involved in a violent case, after which more problems began to arise regularly. He even went as far as neglecting and blackmailing his mother. Because of that, their mother got sick, and then things got much worse. And, as they say, trouble doesn't come alone. Ti-hyun joined the players. It turned out that he had good skills, so he quickly reached level 10, got a B rank certificate, and joined the guild called Andra's. Andra's Guild. The guild, named after one of King Solomon's 72 demons. As a guild with a name like this, there were many bad rumors about it. Ti-hyun had bent over backwards to achieve a higher position in his guild. Even though it wasn't a large guild, Ti-hyun's guild had an important place among medium guilds, so he wanted a higher rank. That's why he was in need of Han Sol. More precisely, her appearance. If she accompanied the elders, there were no girls who could match the beauty of Han Sol. If he presented Han Sol to an elder, he would be able to get a high position. Despite wishing to make his family member a scapegoat, he felt no remorse at all. I don't want to. There's no way I'm joining your guild. Ha, dummy. You just don't know how the world works. Do you think if you always do the right thing, it'll make life easier? Ha, if you come with me to the elders now, it'll make life easier for you and me. How? How can you say that to a family member? Ha, family. That's bullshit. How can people who look like tramps be my family? Who do you think made us live like this? Ti-hyun just smiled in response to his sister's screaming. Who are we living like this because of? Because of the early death of our father, or because of our useless mother? You bastard. She lashed out with anger. Han-Sol squeezed her fists even harder and swung at him. He was no longer family to her. He was a wolf in sheep's skin. No, not even like that. He was garbage. Taehyun stopped her fist with only a slight movement of his hand. He grabbed and squeezed her wrist, inflicting pain all over her body. Now, she, a level 6 girl, couldn't possibly compete with the guy at the 30th level. Let go of me. If you've got nothing but a pretty face, then think about using it. Your brother's an angel. Clean up your bad habits. Taehyun. Go away, woman. He ignored his mother standing before him and stomped to the living room without letting go of the girl's wrists. How about we do it today, huh? When he walked from the lobby to the living room, he saw Kang Yu eating kimchi jjigae. Are you messing with guys? Taehyun asked with a mockery and looked at the girl. When he let go of Han-Sol's wrist, he looked at Kang Yu and said, "Hey there, you're bothering me. Get out of here." After letting out a few more swears, he sauntered over to Kang Yu's side. But the young man was so focused on the food that he didn't care about Taehyun's outrage. "You bastard, get out," I said. He went out of his mind and swung at Kang Yu, who ignored him. But instead of hitting the guy, he turned the table over. And kimchi jjigae. It fell. Lord of the 9,000th circle of hell, the monster ruler of hell, who has made great demons bow before him. The greatest of demons, the greatest of devourers, the greatest of rulers. With a voice like the roar of tens of thousands of demons, he screamed, "My kimchi jjigae. Who does he think he is?" Taehyun glanced at the overturned pot of kimchi jjigae and snickered at Kang Yu, who was howling. Are you crazy? How dare his sister drag some homeless guy into the house? She seemed to be too kind, and she doesn't have any willpower. Where did you find that tramp? Kang Yu, run away. Han-Sol screamed, ignoring her brother's question. Taehyun was bordering level 30, while the Devourer was only at level 4. Without taking into account the Devourer's level, which wasn't that high compared to the girl, he was still incredibly strong. Regardless, Han-Sol didn't want to drag her savior into domestic disputes, and she especially didn't want the guy to get hurt. A tempting thought came to her mind. What if Kang Yu could resolve this situation as well? But it was just a passing fantasy, and the girl shook the thought away. Taehyun was at B level despite being 2nd rank, even though you usually have to get a 3rd or 4th rank to get to B level. A player's strength was classified according to his abilities and level. Therefore, we can say that compared to other people, he was a more talented player. Kang Yu slowly turned his head towards the smug face of Taehyun. Rage was building up in him. When he faced Kang Yu, Taehyun unexpectedly took a step back. What the? A human couldn't have that kind of gaze. It was the gaze of a ferocious, wild beast. No. His face turned pale. Wild beast. No, it felt different. It was a hatred that pulled him down, strangled him. Animals couldn't do that. He was frightened by the eyes he saw. Empty and dark, they were like the deepest abyss. It's like, Taehyun found the right word to describe that look. He had no doubts about it, demon. He had never seen a demon in person, nor did he know exactly what they looked like. But for some reason, he was sure that there was no other term that could describe Kang Yu's face and darkness in his eyes. Taehyun took a deep breath and gathered his strength. Suddenly, the evil energy that had been hovering in the air before had evaporated. It must have been my imagination. He looked carefully at Kang Yu. A homeless person could never have emitted such a frightening wave of ardent anger. Taehyun shook his head trying to throw away the sensations he had just experienced. He didn't want to admit that some homeless man who yelled at him because of the kimchi jjigae he spilled could scare him, even for a moment. Kang Yu turned to Taehyun, who was looking at him, and spoke in a quiet voice, "You. What? Did you spill my kimchi jjigae? You're really out of your mind." Taehyun, dumbfounded by the absurdity of what was going on, giggled unintentionally, and concentrated on the power in his fists. When he found himself on level 10 of the 2nd rank, he had discovered a special skill, Flame of Hands. The blue flame flashed in his palms. Because of the fire, the temperature in the air rose to such an extent that it seemed to light up the house a little more. Special skill. This is a unique ability that only one player has. It was a power that was supposed to help protect the earth from the huge amount of monsters jumping out of the gate. "Look out!" Han-Sol hastily shouted out, and she extended her hand. A light arrow came out of her palm and headed for Taehyun's head. Her special skill was light, rank D. In fact, her strength was more suitable for support and rather than causing damage. As soon as Taehyun waved his hand, his fire swallowed up the arrow. An incomplete ability was nothing more than fun for the player. Ti-Hyun smirked and attacked Kang Yu. The blue flames thickened and headed towards the guy. Kang Yu twitched his head with a sharp movement and escaped the attack. Suddenly, a black blade appeared from the back of Kang Yu's hand. Kang Yu concentrated, lowered his head for a second, and then, with swift movement, deflected another attack, this time swinging the blade back. Ti-Hyun shouted and staggered. He wasn't that fast. The blade was a threat, but the enemy lacked speed. Ti-Hyun, focusing on the blade, rushed forward. At that moment, Kang Yu hit the enemy in the solar plexus with a sharp movement of his leg. From the beginning, the blade was nothing more than a distraction, something that could take Ti-Hyun's attention and distract him. You bastard. The damage caused by the blade was small. Ti-Hyun, still speaking crudely, swung at Kang Yu again. But this time, too, he ducked successfully and hit Ti-Hyun twice, without much effort. Kang Yu stepped towards the staggering guy and reached out with his left hand. Ti-Hyun hastily activated his power, his hands ablaze with flames, and he directed them towards Kang Yu. Kang Yu guessed that his opponent would do this, so he pulled his left hand back and hit him in the jaw with his right hand. When he got hit, he fell to the living room floor. Ti-Hyun, pale, looked at Kang Yu from the ground up. The most important thing was that his endurance and speed have not decreased. That meant that his opponent was a player with lower levels and skills. But, who is he? This guy used battle methods he'd never heard of. Ti-Hyun realized that the sword was just an illusion and Kang Yu instantly found his weaknesses. Using the blade as bait, he went on to hand combat. Ti-Hyun was in so much pain that he squealed but still rushed to Kang Yu. But the outcome was the same. Kang Yu surpassed him in strength by so much that it seemed as if he was fighting a small child. What the hell are you? There were no flaws in his actions. It felt like there was a clear advantage in his fighting skills. It felt like he had decades of training and fighting behind his back. Ti-Hyun, who just a few minutes ago watched a homeless man eat kimchi jjigae, sobbing, was now sobbing himself, but in pain. Kang Yu's black blade was removed from his hand. It hurts. It hurts. I haven't finished yet, Kang Yu said in a cold tone, and shook his palm, which the blade was sticking out of just a second ago. He broke the guy's arm and not only the scream but also the crunch of his bones echoed through the house. Ti-Hyun was in incredible pain. Kang Yu, shaking with anger, looked at his right hand again. The Lord's wrath could not be filled with just one broken arm. You almost redeemed yourself. You shouldn't have overturned my kimchi jjigae. Kimchi jjigae. It's just soup. Hey, you're hurting me. Kang Yu gave Ti-Hyun a hard look. What? He heard something that didn't fit in his head. Are you saying it's just soup? Bullshit. It's bullshit. You can't use the word just to kimchi jjigae. It's unthinkable. It was time for more violent measures. Kang Yu kicked a guy's head like a soccer ball over and over. His whole face was covered with splatters of blood almost at once. Ti-Hyun was moaning in pain. Compared to Kang Yu, he should be superior in all respects. Accordingly, he shouldn't be feeling this hellish pain. But the pain was getting stronger and stronger. So, say it again. What do you think about kimchi jjigae? Kimchi jjigae is a holy dish. That's right, Kang Yu said, nodding with a smile. He grabbed the guy shivering in terror by his hair and quietly said it, once again. What is kimchi jjigae? It's a divine meal. Ti-Hyun answered with a tearful voice. Kang Yu didn't like that answer and his face changed. You're being too quiet. Kimchi jjigae is the best thing humankind ever came up with. You're not putting your soul into words. Kimchi jjigae is a wonderful dish, even louder. Like how believers pray to the Lord God. Like a guy in front of a girl he loves. Put your feelings into it. Kimchi jjigae is the best dish on earth. It was a scream turning into a shriek. But it could not satisfy Kang Yu's wish. He bent over and shouted, Are you loud enough? No. Raise your voice to the 7th octave. Kimchi jjigae. And then, when he broke his voice, he coughed up. Kang Yu has awakened to the cruelty again. What did you just do? Aren't you going to talk properly? I'm sorry. Let's do it one more time. Let's do it again. Kimchi jjigae. The best dish. In this scream, he put all his remaining energy into it. Now Kang Yu was happy and slammed the guy on his shoulder with a smile. Ugh, Ti-Hyun exhaled and cried. He had tears and snot, and soon it all turned into a mess on his face. What the crazy person? Ti-Hyun had a bitter look on his face, his scream echoing all over the house. Why did I get beaten by that jerk? If it was someone from the comic book world, he wouldn't be so upset. But now he wasn't beaten up by a big guy, but a regular hobo. Hobo of kimchi jjigae. Ti-Hyun looked at Kang Yu with bitterness in his eyes. Kang Yu was happy with that reaction and smiled at him. What? Do I look crazy reacting like that just because of kimchi jjigae? No. Kang Yu had hit the bullseye, and so Ti-Hyun hurriedly took his eyes off. Kang Yu continued with a satisfied look, You just don't know anything, and there's no way he could have known. Because he was able to live for 10,000 years because of his feelings and decisions, or because demons live for an unlimited amount of time. Although they do not eat or drink, they can exist forever. It's possible that Kang Yu, who is now half full of magi, could live forever. However, there's still a human half of him. He remembered, with his soul and body, what it's like to enjoy delicious food and drinks. But you can't find and feel that feeling anywhere in the 9,000th circle of hell, because demons are strangers to that feeling by nature. Accordingly, he couldn't satisfy his desires either. He prevented himself from losing his passion and mind in every way. For 10,000 years, maintaining a healthy mind and survival in the endless battles that were carried out by the immortal demons was his main goal. To exist as a man in the devil's world was like torture. He was never satisfied. Thirst never went away. Hell was felt by hell because of the blazing pillars of fire and the vast desert surface. He associated hell with emptiness. You live in a wonderful family, but you can't understand it, just as you can't understand the value of the air you breathe in. If the air disappeared, the man who couldn't stand without air for even a minute would die. Except that no one is grateful for the air. Regret only comes when something you are used to becomes inaccessible. Excuse me, I was wrong. Ti-Hyun didn't know what that guy was talking about. But now he couldn't have done anything better than rubbing his hands to say sorry. Okay, I'll accept your apology, Kang Yu said and grabbed Ti-Hyun by the side. Save me. Don't worry, you won't die. He didn't feel sorry for Ti-Hyun, but even though he already had blood on his hands, he didn't want to kill him. It was all for one reason only: I'm tired of it. Even though murder was the norm in hell, it was nothing than a serious criminal offense on earth. Of course, if you just let someone go, there could be worse problems, but Kang Yu will take care of that now. Thank you. Ti-Hyun bent his head, happy to hear Kang Yu's words that he wouldn't die. Kang Yu looked at Ti-Hyun's bent head and smiled quietly. Although, it would have been better if you had died. Ti-Hyun stopped making any noise. You'll understand soon enough, Kang Yu said and called for Magi. It was the power of fear. The person to whom this power of Orobas is applied becomes afraid and turns into a puppet that won't resist even in his thoughts. It's not a force that takes a lot of Magi, but it was picky about the conditions. It's hard to achieve complete intimidation. It's not easy to intimidate a person enough that fear is entrenched in his soul. It's a force that could only be used under conditions that were perfectly matched to those of today. I need to give it a try. The power would definitely reinforce the fear already in place. Ti-Hyun wet his pants and looked at Kang Yu like a madman. Now you're going to live with that feeling for the rest of your life, said Ti-Hyun with an ominous grin. No, I don't want to. Ti-Hyun's heartbreaking voice told that he didn't have the strength. Kang Yu shrugged his shoulders and answered calmly, If I did well, it wouldn't make me feel any better. The phrase Ti-Hyun previously said to Han Sol now came back to him like a boomerang. Well, go now. Don't tell anyone what happened here. Kang Yu lazily waved for him to shoo, like swatting at a fly. The guy was under his control. Even under torture, he won't tell anyone about anything. Ti-Hyun, who looked completely smashed, staggered out. Han Sol, who saw him come out, walked towards Kang Yu. She came up to him and bowed low. Thank you, Kang Yu. If it hadn't been for you, I wouldn't have been strong enough. This was the man who saved her from the goblins not so long ago. And now, he saved her from Ti-Hyun, who tortured her for several years. She didn't know how to thank Kang Yu. It was not a deed that could be repaid with just words of gratitude. Kang Yu, I will thank you for your help in any way I can, she said in a clear and sincere voice, and bowed again. Kang Yu turned away and smiled a little. Let's clean up first, because the house looks like a real mess. Just a minute. The two of us can do it quicker, Kang Yu said and started cleaning. Han Sol followed his example. During the cleaning, she asked carefully, Where do you live? Because of the unexpected question, only a heavy sigh came out of his mouth. I guess my room is gone. He hadn't paid his rent in 5 years, so someone else must have moved into his little room. Only now did Kang Yu realize that he's really a tramp who doesn't even have a place to sleep. Okay, first we need to find a place to live. That wasn't a big concern for him. Now, compared to the past, he had great power. It wouldn't be hard to get a new place to sleep with his strength. Because of some problems, I don't live anywhere yet. Well, at this point, you could say that I'm a person without a specific place to live, Kang Yu said, shrugging his shoulders. Han Sol frowned and pondered. If so, because of her thoughts, her cheeks have become scarlet and her voice came out a little quieter. Until you find the house, do you want to stay with us? In her agitation, she clenched both her hands. In fact, she hasn't been acting like the most sane person. He'd certainly done a lot for her, but she'd only known this guy for a little over a couple hours. An offer like that certainly wouldn't have crossed the mind of a sane person. I know, but she wanted to get to know Kang Yu better. She was interested in who he was and how he lived. To be more specific, Han Sol was interested in him. Kang Yu's eyes were lit up. An offer he couldn't refuse. Now, for someone who has nowhere to go, a home to relax in would be a starting point for getting used to the earth. Her family may live in bad conditions, but it didn't matter to him. And money, I can make it. If anyone told you that the most important thing on earth is power, know that the most important thing is money. In a capitalist society, money is something godlike. Thank you, then I'll stay with you for a while. The excitement made her face blush even more red. Only now did she realize that what she did was really crazy. Han Sol, please take care of me. PP. It's a classic phrase in Korea when someone does something for you. Yes, okay. They shook hands with each other and nodded their heads. You can use the room my brother used to live in. Okay. Kang Yu nodded and went into the room that the girl showed. There are two priorities. He needed to earn money to live and accumulate magi, which can be used instead of the sealed Manhwa Young. The several hundred powers he possessed were an effective way to win simple battles. For an easy life in the future, he needed to increase the number of magi that he can safely use. Hyun's level is good, too. Even though that guy's speed and strength was, his fighting skills weren't, so it wasn't hard to beat him. But if you meet someone who's higher in level and combat skills, Manhwa Young's sealed power could pose a problem. Identity card has been restored. Before going to the player's support center, Kang Yu headed to the county administration to get an ID. He looked at the employee with a tired look. I hope I won't have to fill out the missing persons form. He was wondering if he could explain where he went missing for 5 years. As he thought about such fabrications, he received his ID, which the employee was holding out. Strangely enough, although he went missing for 5 years from Earth, he was not listed as missing. Did nobody notice my disappearance? Or maybe nobody even knew he existed. With a slightly sad face, he looked at his new ID. How lonely he'd been, how dreary he'd been. I'm going to change now. He didn't even think about going back to his old way of life after living like a dog for 10,000 years. Kang Yu went outside with his new identity card and headed to the place where he and Han Sol had agreed to meet. Oh, Kang Yu, you came. Thanks for waiting. Well, let's go. Han Sol started walking ahead, while Kang Yu trailed behind. Kang Yu, we're here. He didn't have the strength to answer Han Sol. Oh, Kang Yu made a delighted exclamation. He was gawking at the huge masses of people moving around the station. This is a city. The place where Han Sol lived could hardly be called a city, but this place was very different. Kang Yu stepped out after Han Sol and looked around again. The smell of smoke, the mist, the skyscrapers rising up into the sky and the unchangeable asphalt road. People hurrying around to attend whatever business they had. I'm back. When he saw the familiar sight of busy city life, he came to realize that he really came back to Earth. That's the support center over there, Kang Yu. Oh, I see. Kang Yu looked in the direction Han Sol pointed at. Kang Yu grinned when he looked at the place called the Players Support Center. Incheon Airport. The largest airport in the country. The building was so large that it could only be compared to the airport. It's unbelievable that they built a building this size in the heart of the city. It's scary to even imagine how much money must have been invested in it. Did players become this important to society? Well, it's possible if they're considered lifesavers. Well, I'm going to take a basic level class. The lectures will probably start today, so I might finish late. Yeah, I'll see you at home. Yeah, she waved and went off to her class. After splitting up with Han Sol, Kang Yu headed for the registration department. The search didn't take long. An employee who glanced at the ID card several times said automatically, "Go to the test room." Yes, thank you. Kang Yu took the coupon that he had been given and went back in the right direction. There were some very excited guys sitting in front of the test room. Hello, Mom, I'm in front of the test room right now. Yeah, I'll get confirmation and go to class. You just wait. Your son will succeed and get offers from the best guilds. Excuse me, is there anybody here with special powers of rank 1? I have level D. Wow, that's not bad. You didn't happen to come here to get level B rank 2, did you? Ha. But I'm not worth anything compared to players like Baek Kang Hyun and Ki Young-ju. Hey, they say they were at level S when they got rank 1. You can't compare them to us, of course. What about Nam Gi-tae? Have you heard of him? With rank 5, he got S level power and was immediately scouted by the guilds. Yes, I envy him. I can't even dream about rank 1 or 2. But if I get, life will play with new colors. Kang Yu was in the waiting room listening to their conversation. So it's very important to have a special skill level. In fact, the player class was determined by the level of special skill. The skill level plays a particularly important role at a low level, because it was difficult for players with a low level of special skill to raise their level. They no longer felt like it was a special skill. The higher the level, the more likely it was to obtain a high-level specialty, but the low-level players do not have this chance. Kang Yu opened his status window to check the special skill. Special skill. Rank. He couldn't determine the level of his devourer power. Maybe it's out of their league. That would make sense. A feature of level S above the SS level. How strong the SSS level is, Kang Yu couldn't even imagine, but nothing could compare to the devourer's power. That would be cheating. A powerful force that develops itself. Kang Yu had used it for a long time, and by absorbing demons, it reached a high level. But not now. Kang Yu wasn't really worried. Even if the devourer's power was sealed, he could still use Magi, which only needed to be replenished. If he replenished the Magi, it wouldn't be a problem to bring back the old powers. What if I start using the player's powers? Kang Yu was thinking about using more than just his powers from the past. Kang Yu. Yes. Kang Yu followed the voice that called him to the test room. Inside, a snow-white crystal sat there. The players each put their hands on it, appearing very worried. A woman with round glasses came up to Kang Yu. You should put your hands here. When it grasps your strength, the stone will be colored in the color of your special skill. And how will it change? Just like the gate. The higher the level, the darker the color. Kang Yu nodded lightly. I wonder what shade it will become. His level was beyond what it could measure. He didn't know what to expect. Well, whatever it is will be whatever it is. He wasn't the kind of guy to hide his power just to avoid attracting attention. On the contrary, it's better to know your level as it is. He didn't hesitate putting his hands on a rock. You have a special strength of level F, said the woman in an ordinary voice, looking at the stone which barely changed in color, and wrote something down on a piece of paper that she was holding in her hands. Kang Yu shook his head in disbelief as the result was very different from what he expected. Because the power is sealed. That's something he wouldn't know. It's also possible that his power was just too great, and the stone couldn't measure it. Well, there's nothing you can do about it. You couldn't change the results. If they brought in monsters for players to defeat, he could have easily shown his real level. First, you get the player's level E certificate. You are free to go to the level E gate and below. To visit a higher level gate, you must write an application to accept liability. What can I do to increase the level? If you complete the basic training, you will receive level D, then you'll get the mana stone. I see. Come to the counter, we'll prepare your ID. At the same time, you can apply for the basic level education if you're going to study. No, thank you. He didn't even think about getting basic knowledge. Even now, he could lay down an army of monsters with just a tiny amount of Magi. It's a waste of time. Learning basic combat behavior was pointless. He'd studied it for 10,000 years, so going to school would be a waste of time and money. Kang Yu turned around and left the test room. The woman wearing round glasses looked at the passing guy inside. Another guy with no special skills. Strange as it may seem, F-rank 1 players were hardly found. Usually, it was level E, and rarely, with any luck, level D. And he doesn't want to be trained either. It was clear that he was disappointed with the level. But if he was not trained, the result would be obvious. He's dead as soon as he enters the gate. Players of level F aren't taken into any of the guilds. Therefore, they go to the gate alone to raise their rank faster, but in the end, they simply die. She sighs again. It's better not to become a player if you get an F level. It's better to live like a normal person by going to work and getting paid every month. Even if it's low pay, it's better than dying a dog's death. Her gaze fell on the crystal that Kang Yu just walked away from. What is that? His stone suddenly started to turn dark. From snow white to gray, from gray to dark gray. And then, it became almost black. Did it break down or something? It's the first time a crystal stone changed color without anyone touching it. She didn't know what was going on, she just watched. It changed to totally black, and then the stone cracked. The stone that Kang Yu had touched before was shattered into tiny pieces. It's definitely broken. The woman just looked at the shards in despair. He couldn't have such a black special ability. Even the last time when Beak Kang Hyun got an S level, all he had been was dark gray. This was not dark gray, but really black. That had never happened. Next test subject, please wait. She took the broken stone and left the office. That will be all for now. I hope you find this story interesting. Subscribe and enable notifications so you won't miss the next part of this story. Have a wonderful day. Goodbye.